少年よ神話になれ青い風が今胸のドアを叩いても
If you're tuning in, if you've listened to any of the other podcasts, we've already gone through episode 1, episode 2, and we've also given kind of a synopsis on the whole series so far. What we're doing here with this podcast for the Drop Culture Podcast Special Edition, Neon Genesis Evangelion, is we're going through episode by episode with one person, me, Brock, and another person, Dan.
Yeah.
With two sides of the spectrum as far as fandom goes for this whole show. I've been watching the show since I was, not young, but
he was a wee lad.
Since I was, in my early 20s, late teens. And I had a whole bunch of friends that liked it, so it kind of grew on me, and I really did enjoy it. And after all these years, I've still really enjoyed it. So the first,
and as far as I go, this is my first interaction with this
it's
show.
your first go round.
So yeah, like after basically every episode I've just seen this for the first time.
And that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people on Netflix now, getting to see it for that very first time. It's a little bit, it's new, but it's still old. It's one of those series that has always been around that people kind of often cite as being one of the best series that they've ever really unleashed on the world.
There you go.
It's the best way I can kind of say it. So if you're watching along, we have watched episode 3. Next week will be, of course, episode 4. We'll go through the whole series.
Because that's how numbers work.
Yes, in sequence. So we've gotten a lot of really good feedback so far from a lot of people on, the YouTubes, through email, all kinds of different things, and having us kind of look at different ways, and we still encourage that for everything. So now, as a wrap-up for the first couple of episodes, we get to meet our main character in the whole series. His name is Shinji Ikari. He's kind of thrust into this weird, abnormal kind of a world. It's a world that seems to be rebuilding in a way, but also more technologically advanced.
Yeah.
In a way too, and in this episode we get to see a lot of it. He's fought his very first angel, is what they call him. So they're trying to stop Nerve and Sele and all these other groups that we've already learned about. We're trying to stop this cataclysm from happening again. What they believe is a cataclysm,
Right.
which they haven't really got too much into again until this episode. They kind of discuss a little bit about it.
I'll be honest, when they first said Tokyo 3, I was like, they built Tokyo in the swamp. And then it sank.
Yeah.
So they built it again.
So this is the third time.
Right. Dang.
And it's like, I guess.
Little Monty Python reference. Sorry, guys.
Oh, there you go. So there's obviously a big world that's happened in this from 2000, late 99 till 2015, basically, is where we're at. And
2015, the future.
The future, it was. I remember whenever this was happening in 2015 in real time, I was like, oh my God, I got to watch these again, which I did.
Yeah,
and now it's 2019, so now it's old.
Yeah, now it's the past.
Yeah, it's almost been 25 years since the series actually came out,
That's
which
crazy.
is cool.
We're on Tokyo 5 now.
Yeah, we're on Tokyo 18. It's grown so much. So episode 1 kind of shows him getting thrust into the whole world, having to pilot this giant robot now that he believes is a robot that we've seen is actually not a robot. It's more of a...
Really, the second episode's where we saw that it wasn't...
It's a cyborg, in a
where
way.
we could see the eye and all that.
It regenerates tissue. Mm-hmm. It has all of these different engines that run it, or just one engine that runs it. It's got an AT field, absolute terror field. They're basically invulnerable to a lot of different traditional weapons.
So, and I don't know if this happens later on, because I remember in the episode they just say AT field, so I didn't know it was what was it?
Absolute terror
field. I just assumed it was some sort of force field.
Technically, yes, it is. We get to find out a little bit more about that.
We do later on in the show. Okay, cool.
As it develops, they really kind of get into it, and that's what I kind of hope to do with this whole podcast that we're doing, is kind of go episode by episode and grow with it, like you would grow with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I am growing with it.
Yeah, exactly. Seeing
it
for the first time.
a newborn baby.
To the world of Evangelion.
That's right.
So let's get started. this episode basically starts with Shinji attending his new school. We'll just do a real quick synopsis of it. He's really had a hard time kind of dealing with his circumstance.
Well, yeah, and understandably so, because it seems like most his life he lived with his sensei and very away from everyone.
Everybody, yeah. Because you do notice that he has a hard time really connecting with people.
Absolutely. Even, what's her name?
Masato?
Yeah, he's very, like, I don't know what to think about this.
But Masato is also having a hard time kind of connecting with him in a way because she's a little bit older, of course.
And it seems like she's also got some ulterior motives in there.
Yes.
Yeah. Which she speaks of, but doesn't allude to the whole story of it.
Yes, and her and Dr. Ritsuko Akagi are really close. They're both part of the main division that's really kind of has almost taken over at this point now.
Right.
Nerve.
Yeah.
Which is not pronounced Nerve, it's Nerve. Whenever you watch the English dubs for
like the original English
the
dubs?
Netflix, it's
Netflix one.
They call it Nerve.
Nerve.
I don't know why, and they refer to the children as the first children instead of the first child or the second child or something like that. Right. It's weird.
Oh, come on, Nerve.
Come on, Nerve.
Nerve.
So we setting the stage for the very this newer episode. It's been 3 weeks since that first battle.
Okay.
So Shinji now has had more time in the entry plug, which is a cockpit of the robot. He's actually learning. So the very first scene opens up with him basically being in the entry plug in like a virtual simulator.
Right.
You can see that he's like, I don't know. He's still reluctant to do it in a way because he's the way he's kind of doing his duty. He's just doing it to do it.
Yeah, he almost has to talk himself into doing anything. It seems
every
like.
time.
Yeah, like a little mantra, like I got to do this.
Yeah, it's like and then he's like, so he's just going through the motions at this point, and he's really learning what he has to do. So again, having more time inside the entry plug, which it's still the reluctancy, but then also the whole foreign part of it. But he's still.
Also, I think a lot of his reluctancy is because his dad's involved and his dad's a douchebag.
Correct, but he's also getting more used to his obligation now.
Absolutely.
Because he feels that he's obligated to do this now for not only his father, but for everybody else.
Well, I think with Masato showing him Tokyo 3 in the last episode, and and then coming in, I think the last scene was her saying,
congratulations, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. People will thank you for this. Or, whatever.
And he does whatever he's told, right. And that's what Ritsuko says to Masato, that he's kind of like it's his obligation almost. Right. Like he's gonna do it. He'll do whatever he's told at this point. So yeah, that's what he's basically doing. Yeah. Then you get a little bit more of that interaction with him and Masato, because he goes into Masato's room, tries to wake her up, and she's like, "No, I've been working the night shift all night. So I've been 12 hours. You go on and go ahead. How's everything going?" But she's kind of hiding a little bit in a well-lit room.
Right.
And basically it's like under the covers, and her room is still in shambles.
Yeah.
Everything else is still looking okay. Like Shinji's been doing a little bit of cleaning.
It's probably because Shinji's probably just a little OCD.
Yeah, but she's also
she's also a fucking mess.
Yeah, but she also basically says stuff like, "Hey, will you go ahead and take out the burnable trash right now?" So she's got his obligations at home too,
right?
As a normal kid.
Sure.
Now that would be a normal thing,
which makes sense.
Yeah, correct. At that age, you're going to have your normal chores, which they sorted out in the last episode. Which chores he was going to actually do, which were almost all of them except for her.
Yeah, because she's going to be drinking beer.
Yeah, you bisu beer.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically, again, it's more of his obligation. So he's going through the motions before he goes to school. So it's almost like as soon as he leaves, Dr. Ikagi basically calls her up, and she's talking to her over the phone. And you get to see a little bit more about Ritsuko in her domain. She's got like a little note on her computer about a meeting. She's got an ashtray full of cigarette butts and lipstick on them. She's got a little bitty cats on everything,
Right.
So she's at work all the time. It seems like it's like she lives there, which is kind of crazy. And they kind of talk about how he's still not really fitting in. He's got a phone, but nobody's calling. He doesn't really have any friends. 3 weeks is not a lot of time to make a lot of friends, especially if you're new to something like that.
Yeah, but I think, being a kid that went from high school to high school, or from school to school, rather, not high school to high school, just a couple of those in there. I feel like 3 weeks is a lot of time to not have a friend.
Any friend whatsoever. Yeah. So he's still concentrating on, he's kind of at the back of everybody. Everybody's walking to school and he's still kind of at the back. So he's still, again, reluctant to kind of just like throw himself into something.
Yeah, he doesn't try.
Correct. And again, you kind of notice that their living quarters in their block, it seems like nobody else is there except for her balcony has the trees and the vegetation and the seats and everything like that.
Yeah, it seems like the whole rest of the building is empty.
Yeah, and it's empty now, which they kind of get to talk about that a little bit because as soon as, before we get to that, Ritsuko basically talks about the hedgehog's dilemma. Now, this is how I originally heard or knew that the title of this show was actually called Hedgehog's Dilemma back, I think, a long time ago. But now it's actually... it's called The Phone That Doesn't Ring and a Transfer, that's what I remember the most. Because basically she says, the hedgehogs have trouble sharing their warmth because they're so spiny and they don't want to hurt each other the closer that they get. So they kind of stay away from each other. So they kind of equate that to him a little bit, kind of basically.
It's a good metaphor for him. Yeah.
Yeah. But then also Misato kind of says something about finding the space between people and where he's comfortable in that space, how close he wants to get to somebody.
Right.
So whenever he walks into the classroom, he looks over and of course there's Rei. She's still in bandages. She's still looking out the window. So she's really not concentrating on anything around. And you get to see the class rep and you get to see Kinsuke Ida. Kinsuke is the guy with the camera.
Oh yeah.
And he's like, meow, bow, 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 bow. And he's got the fucking, he's got the warship, and the class rep comes in and is like, hey, have you talked to, did you deliver those things for me? Oh no. And they start talking about their other classmate, Toji.
Right.
Toji Suzuhara. And that's kind of when we get to see a little bit more of the human element and the kind of the fallout of what has happened since the angel first came down to them. Right. It's been 15 years after Second Impact.
Right.
So it was a 15-year gap before a major kind of a deal happened.
So 2000.
So, yeah. So it was 2000 basically whenever it happened, and that was before even these guys were born.
Yeah.
So whenever they're kind of sitting there talking, that's when Toji walks in for the first time. So he comes in, he's a bad boy, right? He's like the Fresh Prince of the fucking school. Like, he's not wearing uniform. He's got the fucking zip-up jacket and shit. He's a badass, sits down.
That's when he's that kid from Monster Squad that smokes.
Correct. And he's like only in 7th grade.
That's right.
He's in junior high and they're in grade school. And he's just the badass, and he kind of sits down, and
he's got a dirt bike.
And this is where like,
not really,
yeah, he probably does though.
Yeah, probably.
He's got a little bitty mini scooter.
Yeah.
He's just a badass. Well, then that's when we kind of find out that there's a little bit of fallout from that first initial battle. And that's when they do talk about Toji's sister.
Right.
That actually gets crushed under some rubble.
So he has a reason for this persona that he puts on.
Correct. And he's been gone for 2 weeks too. He's been gone, and that's where they were kind of discussing a little bit. Which, Shinji's up at the very front of the class sitting by himself with his headphones in, just kind of basically trying to not interact and just be there. You know, he's early like those other people are, because you don't see anybody else, but they mention at the same time, oh, look, the class is a lot smaller nowadays. Well, yeah, a lot of people left after that first battle with the robot. And this is where Kinsuke he's more of a instigator, which is kind of fucked up, because he's a little bastard when he does that shit, right? He's like instigating this because he's all into the computer part of it. He's into the robot part of it, the angel part of it, whatever. He's into it.
Very archetypical kind of character.
Correct.
You know?
The nerdy dude with the glasses.
Yeah, but I'm going to start some shit.
And he does. Yeah. And he immediately kind of points out Shinji. He says, oh, did you see the new transfer student? He's a transfer student. When did he get here? Shortly after that first battle with the robot. So that's the beginnings of everything. That's when we get into the lecture too, because that's when the class actually does kind of fill up, and you get to start hearing more about Second Impact from the teacher standpoint. So the teacher's talking about how he said late in the last century, we had the major an object of immeasurable size that landed in the Antarctic and melted all the caps destroyed or killed half of the population and thousands of extra species. So you're here